Indian Subcontinent. History of India. Part 3. What do you know about the history of India? During the Sangam period, Tamil literature flourished from the 3rd century BCE to the 4th century CE. Three Tamil dynasties, collectively known as the three crown kings of Tamilak, Chera dynasty, Chola dynasty, and the Pandya dynasty, ruled parts of southern India. The Sangam literature deals with the history, politics, wars, and culture of the Tamil people of this period. Unlike Sanskrit writers who were mostly Brahmins, Sangam writers came from diverse classes and social backgrounds and were mostly non-Brahmins. Around c. 300 BCE, c. 200 c. Pathupatu, an anthology of 10 mid-length book collections, which is considered part of Sangam literature, were composed. The composition of 8 anthologies of poetic works Edithagai, as well as the composition of 18 minor poetic works Pataninkokanaku, while Tulkapi, the earliest grammarian work in the Tamil language, was developed. Also, during Sangam period, 2 of the 5 great epics of Tamil literature were composed. Ilango Adigal composed Silapatikaram, which is a non-religious work that revolves around Kannagi, and Manine Kalai, composed by Chithalai Chathanar, is a sequel to Silapatikaram and tells the story of the daughter of Kovalan and Madhavi, who became a Buddhist bhikkhuni. The time between the Maurya Empire in the 3rd century BCE and the end of the Gupta Empire in the 6th century CE is referred to as the classical period of India. The Gupta Empire is regarded as the golden age of Hinduism, although a host of kingdoms ruled over India in these centuries. Also, the Sangam literature flourished from the 3rd century BCE to the 3rd century CE in southern India. During this period, India's economy is estimated to have been the largest in the world, having between 1/3 and 1/4 of the world's wealth, from 1 C to 1000 C. Early classical period. The Shungas originated from Magadha and controlled large areas of the central and eastern Indian subcontinent from around 187 to 78 BCE. The dynasty was established by Pushyamitra Shunga, who overthrew the last Maurya emperor. Its capital was Pataliputra, but later emperors, such as Bhagabhadra, also held court at Vidisha, modern Bisnagar. Pushyamitra Shunga ruled for 36 years and was succeeded by his son Agnimitra. There were 10 Shunga rulers. However, after the death of Agnimitra, the empire rapidly disintegrated. Inscriptions and coins indicate that much of northern and central India consisted of small kingdoms and city-states that were independent of any Shunga hegemony. The empire is noted for its numerous wars with both foreign and indigenous powers. They fought with the Mahingavahana dynasty of Kalinga, Satavahana dynasty of Deccan, the Indo-Greeks, and possibly the Panchalas and Mitras of Mathura. Art, education, philosophy, and other forms of learning flowered during this period, including architectural monuments such as the Stupa at Bharha and the renowned Great Stupa at Sanchai. The Shunga rulers helped to establish the tradition of royal sponsorship of learning and art. The script used by the empire was a variant of Brahmi and was used to write the Sanskrit language. The Shunga Empire played an imperative role in patronizing Indian culture at a time when some of the most important developments in Hindu thought were taking place. The Satavahanas were based from Amaravati in Andhra Pradesh as well as Junnar and Prathistan in Maharashtra. The territory of the empire covered large parts of India from the 1st century BCE onward. The Satavahanas started out as feudatories to the Mauryan dynasty, but declared independence with its decline. The Satavahanas are known for their patronage of Hinduism and Buddhism, which resulted in Buddhist monuments from Ellora to Amaravati. They were one of the first Indian states to issue coins with their rulers embossed. They formed a cultural bridge and played a vital role in trade as well as the transfer of ideas and culture, and from the Indo-Gangetic plain to the southern tip of India. They had to compete with the Shunga Empire and then the Kanva dynasty of Magadha to establish their rule. Later, they played a crucial role to protect large part of India against foreign invaders like the Sakas, Yavanas, and Pallavas. In particular, their struggles with the western Kshatrapas went on for a long time. The notable rulers of the Satavahana dynasty Gautamiputra Satakarni and Sri Yajna Satakarni were able to defeat the foreign invaders like the western Kshatrapas and to stop their expansion. In the 3rd century CE, the empire was split into smaller states. The spice trade in Kerala attracted traders from all over the Old World to India. India's southwest coastal port Muziris had established itself as a major spice trade center from as early as 3000 BCE, according to Sumerian records. Jewish traders arrived in Kochi, Kerala, India as early as 562 BCE. The Greco-Roman world followed by trading along the incense route and the Roman India routes. During the 2nd century BCE, Greek and Indian ships met to trade at Arabian ports such as Aden. During the 1st millennium, the sea routes to India were controlled by the Indians and Ethiopians that became the maritime trading power of the Red Sea. Indian merchants involved in spice trade took Indian cuisine to Southeast Asia, where spice mixtures and curries became popular with the native inhabitants. Buddhism entered China through the Silk Road in the 1st or 2nd century CE. Hindu and Buddhist religious establishments of Southeast Asia came to be associated with the economic activity and commerce as patrons and trust large funds which would later be used to benefit the local economy by estate management, craftsmanship, promotion of trading activities. Buddhism in particular traveled alongside the maritime trade, promoting coinage, art, and literacy. The Kushan Empire expanded out of what is now Afghanistan into the northwest of the Indian subcontinent under the leadership of their first emperor, Kujula Kadphises, about the middle of the 1st century CE. The Kushans were possibly a Tocharian-speaking tribe, one of 5 branches of the Yuezhi Confederation. By the time of his grandson, Kanishka the Great, the empire spread to encompass much of Afghanistan and then the northern parts of the Indian subcontinent. Emperor Kanishka was a great patron of Buddhism. However, as Kushans expanded southward, the deities of their later coinage came to reflect its new Hindu majority. Historian Vincent Smith said about Kanishka, he played the part of a second Ashoka in the history of Buddhism. The empire linked the Indian Ocean maritime trade with the commerce of the Silk Road through the Indus Valley, encouraging long-distance trade, particularly between China and Rome. The Kushans brought new trends to the budding and blossoming Gandhara art and Mathura art, which reached its peak during Kushan rule. The period of peace under Kushan rule is known as Pax Kushana. By the 3rd century, their empire in India was disintegrating and their last known great emperor was Vasudeva I. The Gupta period was noted for cultural creativity, especially in literature, architecture, sculpture, and painting. The Gupta period produced scholars such as Kalidasa, Aryabhata, Varahamihira, Vishnu Sharma, and Vatsyayana. The Gupta period marked a watershed of Indian culture. The Guptas performed Vedic sacrifices to legitimize their rule, but they also patronized Buddhism, an alternative to Brahmanical orthodoxy. The military exploits of the first 3 rulers, Chandragupta I, Samudragupta, and Chandragupta II, brought much of India under their leadership. Science and political administration reached new heights during the Gupta era. Strong trade ties also made the region an important cultural center and established it as a base that would influence nearby kingdoms and regions. The period of peace under Gupta rule is known as Pax Gupta. The latter Guptas successfully resisted the northwestern kingdoms until the arrival of the Alchon Huns, who established themselves in Afghanistan by the first half of the 5th century CE, with their capital at Bamiyan. However, much of the southern India, including Deccan, were largely unaffected by these events. Vakataka Empire. The Vakataka Empire originated from the Deccan in the mid-3rd century CE. Their state is believed to have extended from the southern edges of Malwa and Gujarat in the north to the Tungabhadra River in the south, as well as from the Arabian Sea in the western to the edges of Chhattisgarh in the east. They were the most important successors of the Satavahanas in the Deccan, contemporaneous with the Guptas in northern India, and succeeded by the Vishnukundana dynasty. The Vakatakas are noted for having been patrons of the arts, architecture, and literature. The rock-cut Buddhist viharas and chaityas of Ajanta caves were built under the patronage of Vakataka Emperor Harishina. Samudragupta's 4th century Allahabad pillar inscription mentions Kamarupa and Devaka as frontier kingdoms of the Gupta Empire. Devaka was later absorbed by Kamarupa, which grew into a large kingdom that spanned from Karatoya River to near present Sadia and covered the entire Brahmaputra Valley, North Bengal, parts of Bangladesh, and, at times, Purnia and parts of West Bengal. Ruled by 3 dynasties: Varmanas c. 350,650 c. and Mlechcha dynasty c. 655,900 c. and Kamarupa Palas c. 900,110 c. from their capitals in present-day Guwahati, Tezpur, and North Guwahati respectively. All 3 dynasties claimed their descent from Narakasura. In the reign of the Varman king, Bhaskar Varman, the Chinese traveler Xuanzang visited the region and recorded his travels. Later, after weakening and disintegration, the Kamarupa tradition was somewhat extended until c. 1255 c. by the lunar IC 120,118 c. and lunar 2 dynasties. The Kamarupa kingdom came to an end in the middle of the 13th century when the Ken dynasty under Sandhya of Kamarupa Nagara moved his capital to Kamatapur after the invasion of Muslim Turks and established the Kamata kingdom. The Pallavas, during the 4th to 9th centuries, were, alongside the Guptas of the north, great patronizers of Sanskrit development in the south of the Indian subcontinent. The Pallava reign saw the first Sanskrit inscriptions in a script called Grantha. Early Pallavas had different connections to Southeast Asian countries. The Pallavas used Dravidian architecture to build some very important Hindu temples and academies in Mamallapuram, Kanchipuram, and other places. Their rule saw the rise of great poets. The practice of dedicating temples to different deities came into vogue, followed by fine artistic temple architecture and sculpture style of Vastu Shastra. Pallavas reached the height of power during the reign of Mahendravarmana and Narasimhavarmana and dominated the Telugu and northern parts of the Tamil region until the end of the 9th century. Kadambas originated from Karnataka, was founded by Mayurasharma in 345 CE, which at later times showed the potential of developing into imperial proportions. King Mayurasharma defeated the armies of Pallavas of Kanchi, possibly with help of some native tribes. The Kadamba fame reached its peak during the rule of Kakasthavarma, a notable ruler with whom the kings of Gupta dynasty of northern India cultivated marital alliances. The Kadambas were contemporaries of the Western Ganga dynasty, and together they formed the earliest native kingdoms to rule the land with absolute autonomy. The dynasty later continued to rule as a feudatory of larger Kannada empires, the Chalukya and the Rashtrakuta empires, for over 500 years, during which time they branched into minor dynasties. Empire of Harsha. Harsha ruled northern India from 606 to 647 CE. He was the son of Prapikarvardhana and the younger brother of Rajyavardhana, who were members of the Vardhana dynasty and ruled Thainsar in present-day Haryana. After the downfall of the prior Gupta Empire in the middle of the 6th century, North India reverted to smaller republics and monarchical states. The power vacuum resulted in the rise of the Vardhanas of Thainsar, who began uniting the republics and monarchies from the Punjab to central India. After the death of Harsha's father and brother, representatives of the empire crowned Harsha emperor in April 606 CE, giving him the title of Maharaja. At the height of his power, his empire covered much of north and northwestern India, extended east until Kamarupa and south until Narmada River, and eventually made Kannauj his capital, and ruled until 647 CE. The peace and prosperity that prevailed made his court a center of cosmopolitanism, attracting scholars, artists, and religious visitors. During this time, Harsha converted to Buddhism from Surya worship. The Chinese traveler Xuanzang visited the court of Harsha and wrote a very favorable account of him, praising his justice and generosity. His biography, Harsha Charita, written by Sanskrit poet Banabhatta, describes his association with Thainsar and the palace with a 2-storied Davalagriha. Early medieval India began after the end of the Gupta Empire in the 6th century CE. This period also covers the late classical age of Hinduism, which began after the end of the Gupta Empire, and the collapse of the Empire of Harsha in the 7th century CE, the beginning of imperial Kannauj, leading to the tripartite struggle, and ended in the 13th century with the rise of the Delhi Sultanate in northern India, and the end of the later Cholas with the death of Rajendra Chola III in 1279 in southern India. However, some aspects of the classical period continued until the fall of the Vijayanagara Empire in the south around the 17th century. From the 5th century to the 13th, Srauta sacrifices declined, and initiatory traditions of Buddhism, Jainism, or more commonly Shaivism, Vaishnavism, and Shaktism expanded in royal courts. This period produced some of India's finest art, considered the epitome of classical development, and the development of the main spiritual and philosophical systems which continued to be in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. In the 7th century CE, Kumarila Bhatta formulated his school of Mimamsa philosophy and defended the position on Vedic rituals against Buddhist attacks. Scholars note Bhatta's contribution to the decline of Buddhism in India. In the 8th century, Adi Shankara traveled across the Indian subcontinent to propagate and spread the doctrine of Advaita Vedanta, which he consolidated, and is credited with unifying the main characteristics of the current thoughts in Hinduism. He was a critic of both Buddhism and Mimamsa school of Hinduism, and founded Mathas for the spread and development of Advaita Vedanta. Muhammad bin Qasim's invasion of Sind in 711 CE witnessed further decline of Buddhism. From the 8th to the 10th century, 3 dynasties contested for control of northern India: the Gurjara Pratiharas of Malwa, the Palas of Bengal, and the Rashtrakutas of the Deccan. The Sena dynasty would later assume control of the Pala Empire. The Gurjara Pratiharas fragmented into various states, notably the Paramaras of Malwa, the Chandelas of Bundelkhand, the Kalachuras of Mahakashal, the Tamaras of Haryana, and the Chauhans of Rajputana. These states were some of the earliest Rajput kingdoms, while the Rashtrakutas were annexed by the western Chalukyas. During this period, the Chalukya dynasty emerged. The Chalukyas constructed the Dilwara temples, Madhura Sun Temple, Rani Kai Vav in the style of Maru Gurjara architecture, and their capital Anhilwara was one of the largest cities in the Indian subcontinent, with the population estimated at 100,000 and 1,000 CE. The Chola Empire emerged as a major power during the reign of Raja Chola, and Rajendra Cholhai, who successfully invaded parts of Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka in the 11th century. Lalitaditya Muktapida was an emperor of the Kashmiri Karkota dynasty, which exercised influence in northwestern India from 625 C until 1003, and was followed by Lohara dynasty. Kalhana in his Rajatarangini credits King Lalitaditya with leading an aggressive military campaign in northern India and Central Asia. The Hindu Shahi dynasty ruled portions of eastern Afghanistan, northern Pakistan, and Kashmir from the mid-7th century to the early 11th century. While in Odisha, the Eastern Ganga Empire rose to power, noted for the advancement of Hindu architecture, most notable being Jagannath Temple and Konark Sun Temple, as well as being patrons of art and literature. Soon we will publish Part 4. Thank you for watching.